Poor black mechanic. Saves racist boss's daughter. Her father's next move. Shocks everyone. It was a typical sweltering afternoon at Jackson Auto Repair, the kind where the heat from the sun and the warmth from the engines inside the garage seemed to merge into one suffocating blanket, and Malik, a young black mechanic, wiped sweat from his brow as he crouched over the hood of a stubborn sedan, muttering under his breath and tightening bolts with a practiced hand, completely absorbed in the rhythm of his work. The smell of oil, grease, and hot metal filled the air, punctuated by the occasional clang of a wrench hitting the concrete floor. He had been here for hours, ignoring the buzzing of his phone and the distant chatter outside, when suddenly the garage doors swung open with an urgent force, startling him. There she was, Emily Whitmore, the boss's teenage daughter, carelessly staring at her phone as she darted into the street, oblivious to the danger around her. Malik's heart skipped a beat when he saw the glint of an approaching car rounding the corner, its tires screeching violently against the asphalt as if warning of the disaster that could strike any second. Time seemed to slow, and instinct took over. Without a moment's hesitation, Malik lunged forward, pushing Emily to the side with a strength he didn't even realize he had, his hands gripping her arms firmly, yanking her out of the path of the speeding vehicle. The car roared past, missing her by mere inches, leaving behind a cloud of dust and the distant echo of panic from nearby pedestrians. Emily's phone slipped from her hands and skidded across the pavement, landing with a harmless clatter, and, for a moment, everything felt frozen. The dust settling, the engine's hum fading, and the adrenaline still coursing through Malik's veins. People began to gather, some clapping and cheering while others murmured, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief as they processed the bravery they had just witnessed. Malik, breathing heavily, straightened himself and wiped the sweat from his forehead again, trying to regain composure, feeling the thrum of his heartbeat in his chest and the lingering tension of what could have been a tragedy. Emily stood there, her wide eyes locked on him, the color draining slightly from her cheeks as the reality of her narrow escape sank in, and she whispered almost inaudibly, "You saved me?" Malik shook his head with a modest smile, brushing off the praise, insisting in his mind that he had done nothing extraordinary, that anyone would have acted the same way, though a strange warmth spread through him at the recognition. Around them, the world slowly returned to normal. The distant honk of another car, a dog barking, the soft shuffle of feet on the street, but for Malik and Emily, that moment had stretched into something far greater than either could articulate. A collision of fear, instinct, and human decency that left its mark on everyone present. A story that would undoubtedly ripple through the small town in whispers and exclamations for days to come, marking the beginning of a chain of events that no one could yet predict. Word of Malik's heroic act spread through the town faster than anyone could imagine, and by the time the afternoon sun had begun to dip, casting long shadows across Jackson Auto Repair, the tension inside the garage was palpable. Mr. Whitmore, a wealthy businessman known throughout the city for his sharp tongue, controlling nature, and deeply ingrained prejudices, stormed into the workshop like a thunderclap, his polished shoes scuffing the concrete floor as he glared at Malik with eyes full of disbelief and anger rather than gratitude. His face was flushed with fury, veins standing out along his temples, and every step he took seemed to shake the very walls of the garage. "What were you thinking, Malik? Touching my daughter?" he demanded, his voice sharp and commanding, cutting through the clatter of tools and the hum of engines like a whip. Malik straightened, hands resting calmly on the edge of the workbench, and met the man's gaze with quiet determination. "Sir," he said evenly, his tone measured and deliberate, "she could have been hit. I did what anyone would do in that situation. I reacted to protect her." Mr. Whitmore's lips pressed into a thin line, a mixture of frustration and wounded pride, and he let out a scoffing laugh, shaking his head in disbelief as though the very idea of a black mechanic acting bravely in front of his daughter was some kind of insult rather than the truth. Around them, the atmosphere was tense, charged, and uncomfortably silent except for the soft whir of a nearby engine and the distant honks of traffic outside, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Emily, still shaken but visibly relieved, stepped closer to Malik, her voice soft but insistent. "You saved my life. I don't know how to repay you." Malik shook his head slowly, brushing off the notion of repayment, insisting silently that heroism should never come with a price, or expectation. Yet he couldn't ignore the weight of her words, the sincerity shining through her grateful eyes. Despite the gratitude flowing from his daughter, Mr. Whitmore's mind churned with indignation and disbelief, a storm of entitlement and resentment brewing beneath the surface. In that moment, it became clear that the man who had once dismissed Malik's presence in his life and business was now plotting, in quiet and subtle ways, to remind him of what he considered his place, to assert control over a situation that had spun beyond his immediate command. Tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating, a clash of courage and prejudice, gratitude and arrogance, leaving everyone in the garage aware that the aftermath of this single split-second act of bravery would ripple far beyond the immediate moment, setting the stage for conflicts and revelations yet to come, and marking Malik not just as a mechanic, but as someone whose actions would challenge the very foundations of respect, authority, and justice within the small community that watched, judged, and whispered as events unfolded. The morning after the incident, Malik received an unexpected call from Mr. Whitmore, summoning him to the mansion under the pretense of a reward, and although Malik's instincts warned him to remain cautious, he decided to go, knowing that politeness and professionalism were the only armor he could wear in the face of the man's notorious temper. As he approached the grand estate, the towering gates and pristine driveway reflecting the power and wealth of the Whitmore family, Malik felt a mixture of curiosity and unease, wondering whether this was truly an offer of recognition or another attempt to assert control and remind him of the boundaries society had drawn around people like him. Upon entering the mansion, the first thing he noticed was Emily, rushing toward him with a bright, genuine smile that immediately eased some of his tension, her eyes sparkling with relief and gratitude. And in that moment, Malik felt a warmth that reminded him of why he had acted without hesitation the day before. Mr. Whitmore appeared shortly after, his posture formal, his face composed but his eyes betraying a flicker of uncertainty, as though he were performing a role rather than genuinely acknowledging Malik's bravery. The father clapped his hands and announced loudly, with a tone meant to impress and perhaps intimidate, that a scholarship opportunity had been arranged for Malik, claiming it was a reward for his bravery, and for a brief moment Malik hesitated, sensing that the gesture might carry strings attached, an obligation to gratitude that could be weaponized in subtle ways. Yet Emily tugged at his sleeve and whispered earnestly, "It's real, Malik. You deserve this." Her words infused with sincerity and a conviction that seemed to bridge the gap between him and her father's authority. And slowly, Malik began to understand that change sometimes starts not from force but from unexpected allies who choose to speak up and influence those in positions of power. As Mr. Whitmore observed, Malik noticed a shift in the man's demeanor, subtle but undeniable, a loosening of pride and resistance, hinting that Emily's gentle insistence had prompted him to confront his own prejudices and acknowledge the worth and courage of someone he had once dismissed. Malik accepted the scholarship, realizing that this gesture, while small, represented more than recognition of his act. It symbolized the potential for progress, the importance of integrity, and the power of advocacy even within the confines of privilege and authority. In that moment, the mansion, the polished floors, and the formalities around him faded into the background, and what remained was the clarity that sometimes a single act of courage, coupled with the unwavering support of those who believe in justice and fairness, could ripple outward, challenging assumptions, inspiring change, and reshaping the way individuals perceive one another. And as Malik left the mansion that day, scholarship in hand, He carried not just the tangible reward, but a deeper understanding that true respect cannot be demanded. It is earned through courage, action, and the willingness of others to see beyond bias and embrace humanity. Weeks had passed since Malik's quick-thinking heroism had saved Emily from what could have been a tragic accident, and in that time, the story had spread throughout the town, quietly transforming the way many people thought about courage, respect, and the value of actions over social status. On a crisp Saturday morning, the local community center was filled with townspeople gathered to honor Malik, the young black mechanic whose bravery had become an unexpected symbol of integrity and selflessness. The room buzzed with conversation, the low murmur of anticipation mixing with the soft clinking of chairs as families, friends, and neighbors settled into place, all drawn by curiosity and admiration. Malik entered quietly, his overalls replaced by a simple but clean outfit, and despite the applause that followed him, he remained humble, nodding politely, his eyes scanning the room with quiet gratitude. At the back of the hall stood Mr. Whitmore, Emily's father, his posture stiff, his expensive suit seeming almost uncomfortable against the casual atmosphere, and it was clear to everyone that he felt out of place, caught between pride and the undeniable truth of the recognition his daughter's life had demanded. Emily, radiant with pride and confidence, stepped forward to present Malik with a polished plaque, her smile wide and genuine, radiating warmth that seemed to soften even her father's rigid demeanor. "For courage, quick thinking, and selfless action," she announced, her voice carrying through the hall, and the crowd erupted in applause, some standing, some clapping, their faces reflecting admiration and a quiet sense of justice served. Mr. Whitmore approached Malik cautiously, each step deliberate, his eyes fixed on the mechanic he had once dismissed as inferior, and when he finally spoke, his voice trembled slightly, softened by the weight of his own realization. "I underestimated you," he admitted, the words simple but heavy with the humility he had long resisted showing, and for the first time, Malik saw a shift, a genuine acknowledgement of worth that went beyond social hierarchy or prejudice. Malik nodded once, a subtle but firm gesture, conveying understanding and the quiet strength that comes from knowing that respect is something earned, not demanded, and the tension that had once hung in the room dissipated like fog under sunlight. Emily hugged Malik, whispering in his ear, "You changed everything." And in that embrace it was clear that Malik's act of courage had ripple effects far beyond that moment on the street. It had challenged deep-seated assumptions, inspired a father to reconsider his own biases, and reminded an entire community that true heroism often comes from the most unexpected people. As the ceremony continued, Malik stood humbly, accepting congratulations and kind words, the plaque in his hands a tangible reminder that bravery, integrity, and selflessness could reshape hearts, minds, and the world around him, proving that one decisive act in a critical moment had the power to alter perceptions, inspire change, and leave an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it.